Welcome back to Autoimmune Adventures. I'm Stacy, and as always, I'm here with my amazing sisters, Becky and Alicia. Today's episode is one that is very personal to me. For those who may not know, I've experienced multiple miscarriages, and I know firsthand how confusing, heartbreaking, and isolating fertility struggles can feel. When you're in that space, you ask so many questions. Why is this happening? What have I missed? Is there something wrong that someone hasn't found out yet? And sometimes the answers you receive don't feel complete, and you're left with everything looks normal, even when your heart and body are telling you something isn't right. Fertility challenges are something many people in the autoimmune community face. Yet they're not always talked about openly, and for so many people, the journey can feel overwhelming, filled with uncertainty, frustration, and difficult decisions. That's why we're so grateful to have today's guest with us. We're joined by Grace Charles, who focuses on identifying the root causes of infertility rather than immediately moving to treatments without deeper investigation. Her work centers on asking better questions, looking beyond surface level answers, and helping patients understand what may truly be interfering with their fertility. Grace, we're so glad that you're here with us today, and we're really looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you. Me too.
So Grace, let's start at the beginning. What first made you realize that something was missing in the way that infertility has been diagnosed and was being diagnosed and treated in traditional medical settings?
Yeah, so the traditional medical setting that I was in, I'm in a small town in rural Colorado, and I was doing general practice for women. I'm a naturopathic doctor. So I was taking a functional perspective on their cases and adding to their team. They would go to their gynecologist and they would come to me, and maybe they would also have a primary care physician. And the women coming to me were telling me that, they were having trouble getting pregnant, and that their gynecologist was telling them to go to a fertility center in Denver. Now, this is annoying on many reasons, right? Denver is 3 hours away from us. Like, it's a big haul to say, like, oh, really? I have to go to another doctor so far away. So they were coming to me and saying, what can you do about it? And so I would do my job, and when I would run some labs, and I'd say, oh goodness, you're not ovulating, or oh, here we have a lot of inflammation here, or I do kind of a general naturopathic care, women's care of them, and sometimes that would be very helpful, and sometimes we would hit roadblocks. But at first I thought that was just a limitation of rural medicine, that most cases of fertility were being outsourced to Denver. But in the pandemic, when my job started being telehealth, I was able to kind of open up and treat more people in Colorado, even women in Denver. And they were telling me the same thing, that their OB was saying, oh, I don't know why you're not getting pregnant. Why don't you go to the RE, the reproductive endocrinologist? And that meeting would almost always, 100% of the time, lead to a conversation about IVF. And my patients were just uncomfortable making that leap without understanding the why. And that's where I just started heading clinically, of focusing more and more of my efforts into unpacking those cases and helping those couples get answers. But I think I saw that gap in, well, the OB runs some basic workup, as they are trained to do. Gynecologists I think, are incredible clinicians. They act as primary care for many women. They do our breast health. They're working with precocious puberty in 7-year-olds, menopause, postmenopausal symptoms in 70-year-olds. They are surgeons. They deliver babies. They're incredible. And unless you happen to know an OB who just loves fertility and wants to know more about it, the algorithm is, we run this small handful of tests, and if they're normal and the patient's still not getting pregnant, well, then they need specialized workup. Or if they're abnormal and it's not something in their comfort to treat, like a thyroid issue, or like diagnosing a tube blockage or something, then they are referred to specialists for further workup. The specialist is a reproductive endocrinologist. And I think the breakdown of our medical system, and now I'm getting on a soapbox right off the bat, is that our specialists have really great treatment tools, and they don't always step back and dig deeper into the diagnostics. And I think if somebody is going to go through something like IVF, which is very expensive, it's very invasive, it's uncomfortable, it's a big commitment, they at least want to have the information of, well, why am I doing this? Why am I being sent down this path?
So many women are told that they have unexplained infertility, which can feel incredibly frustrating and discouraging when you go to a doctor and that's what you've been told and when you're looking for answers. So from your experience, what are some of the most common root causes that end up being missed?
Yeah, I don't believe in unexplained infertility. And I just had a call yesterday with a gal, and that was her line off the bat. I don't believe in unexplained infertility. I was like, me neither. Let's explain it, right? Like I can understand a physician or a healthcare provider saying, I can't explain your infertility, but I don't think it's good enough to say it is unexplainable. So my job, and I mean, those are the cases I catch, right? Those are the people who, the women and couples who are coming to me. Usually they might have a diagnosis, but they don't feel like they have the full story, or they really have been stamped with unexplained infertility. So what I'm finding is a lot of autoimmunity, which is why I was drawn to this podcast to kind of spread the word as a really common cause, especially secondary infertility. That means you've already had a full-term pregnancy. You've already done this. And why can't I have baby number 2 or 3 or beyond? All of a sudden, your fertility seems to stop. That's really, autoimmunity is often the root of that, because those autoimmune conditions can burst during these high hormonal times, like puberty, having a baby, perimenopause. I see a lot of environmental issues, just liver overload, environmental toxins. I'm not sure if you've seen it's brand new, just came out 2 or 3 weeks ago. It's a documentary on Netflix called The Plastic Detox. It was done by this fabulous researcher, Dr. Swan. She's in reproductive health. And they took 6 couples with unexplained infertility, and they removed plastics and plasticizers from their lives for 3 months. That was the intervention. That was all they did. And it's focusing on phthalates and BPA. I won't spoil the ending, but it was incredible to see the progress that their fertility made by removing these environmental toxicants. So I find a lot of that. I work with a lot of that. Nutrient deficiencies, gut issues, inflammation, blood sugar problems. Men, I mean, I can't tell you, maybe probably 1 in 4 women who come to me and say, why aren't I getting pregnant? The answer is their husband's subfertility or infertility, and he just hasn't been properly worked up yet. So I see a lot of that too.
That's got to be frustrating, because is it almost always assumed that it's the woman's issue?
It's why is fertility a women's health issue? Pregnancy is, surely, but fertility, it literally takes 2, right? That is how it works. And to not work up the male half to the same degree as the female half we're missing a boat. And I think there's cultural leniency. We don't like to tell men they're wrong. There's all sorts of things, layers getting in the way. Absolutely. But I can't tell you how many times they'll say like, oh, the doctor said the sperm was good enough, or they said his semen analysis looked fine. I say, okay, we'll send it over. And it's like, wait a minute, several of these parameters are flagged. The morphology is poor, the count is low. And across the board, like, we've been changing what is an acceptable sperm count for men over the decades, because it's getting lower. In the 1950s, it was twice. Men made twice as much sperm as they do now. So we're like accommodating for that fertility decline just by changing the normals, which doesn't make any sense to me. Blood work also is an important part of the male workup. A semen analysis can tell us a lot. It's such a neat and cheap lab. But blood work can really put that into context. It can tell us about inflammation levels. It can tell us about blood sugar. And then there's additional testing that can be done on the sperm as well. We can do something called a DNA fragmentation test, where a sperm gets cracked open and we say, how fragile is the DNA inside? Are these sperm carrying quality DNA? So there's a lot more workup that can be done, and it's not terribly expensive. It's not invasive. I mean, it's not a big deal to do a semen analysis. Men get squeamish about it, but most of them you can do like an at-home kit. So yeah, I don't have much patience for for that piece.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you.
But
I've
because
had a
it's
lot of
heartbreaking for the
friends who are
women.
like, well, I've had a lot of friends who have been suffering from infertility and have gone through years of testing until they finally convince their husband,
Mhm.
I need you to get tested too, because they're not finding anything. And inevitably, that's a large piece of the puzzle. So I
Yes.
think that if we could live in a world where we would normalize it, that men and women, when they have a fertility struggle in a marriage, in a relationship, that they both get tested automatically, I would love to see that in the future. That would be amazing.
Yes, and I should say I don't have a lot of patience for the men who aren't like really interested in getting involved. But I say most of my practice, the men are like waiting for this opportunity. They want this. They're super stoked to get blood work done. Like guys love, oh, what's my testosterone levels? Like they want to know that stuff. But also like they've basically been told just sit on your hands until your wife gets pregnant and like do the job every time she's fertile. But like they don't feel empowered to do much else, and they want to. So I don't want to throw all men under the bus. Most of the patients and clients that are coming to me are asking for more workup and more involvement, and like what else can I do to improve my fertility? So
I love that. That's fantastic. All right. For someone who has been trying to conceive for a while, what are some of the early signs that there might be an underlying issue that hasn't been properly investigated yet?
I think looking to the menstrual cycle is a really important first step. We don't get great training as young women of like what normal is. So we assume if we've been dealing with this type of menstrual cycle our whole lives, then that is indeed normal. Lisa Hendrickson Jack wrote this really neat book called The Fifth Vital Sign. And what she suggested is that we take, you walk into the office, you get your blood pressure taken, you get your height and weight, right? You get your vital signs, your temperature. We should be using the menstrual cycle as another vital sign, as another indicator of imbalance. And periods shouldn't be awful. We shouldn't bleed for 7 days. We shouldn't have to stay home. We shouldn't have to take Midol. We shouldn't have to. PMS shouldn't like destroy our marriages once a month. There's so many like pieces. If I can just hear somebody's menstrual history and how their periods are presenting each month, I feel like half the case maybe that's not half the case, but I can get so much information from that. So I think that's something to start paying attention to if you don't already, start tracking if you don't already. But we want to see a period that comes predictably every 26, 27, 31, 32 days, somewhere in that range, monthly-ish. It's okay if it's not like every 29 days. We want 3, 4, 5 days of bleeding, red blood. We don't want brown blood. We don't want a ton of clots. We don't want a ton of pain, right? Like we want this optimal menstrual cycle. So I think that's something to look for, first of all, is your endocrine system, are your hormones throwing up signs? But also like, how well do you feel? How vital do you and your husband feel? Are you tired all the time? Are you crashing after lunch? Are you in chronic pain? I just had a patient who the husband finally got a hip replacement surgery that he just had been putting off. And a month later, they got pregnant, right? That inflammation was getting in the way. And that was something that they weren't like putting together necessarily like, oh, this is causing infertility or this is keeping us from getting pregnant. So I think those are the kinds of things you look for. General health, but if we want to dig into female fertility, yeah, let's look to the menstrual cycle.
I think it's crazy how many women don't track their menstrual cycle. We can learn so much, just like how to live our lives and how to feel better, how to eat, how to sleep, how to move, like when to avoid confrontation with your husband, like all of these things that you could benefit from if you tracked your cycle. I have 4 daughters and I'm like, you guys, can you just get
a family tracker?
Get an app. Just get an app on your phone. Like put it in there so you're not surprised and bleeding out of your pants at school. Like this is, and maybe that's like a horrific rite of passage for every middle schooler. I don't know. I hope not. But I'm like, if you tracked your cycle, you would know when to expect things to happen and you could prepare for them.
Absolutely. And
So-
there's fun new tech in tracking.
Yes.
So, I mean, I'm old fashioned and I certainly like basal body temperature. I think that's so neat, especially when it comes to fertility, right? And narrowing in on that. Well, when did I ovulate? But I mean, there's a product called Temp Drop, which I really like. It's a band that goes around your arm every night. So it takes the average of your core temperature all night long. Some people are getting core temperature from their smart rings, right? The Aura ring, or there are a couple of those on the market. It's not technically BBT because it's not your core temperature. It's on your finger. But there's some interest there. I mean, I'm curious about learning more. But the urine trackers, the urine metabolite trackers are so fun because we're not just seeing, most of us know about those, they're called OPKs, the ovulation predictor kits. You can buy them at the Walmart. And they track a hormone called LH. LH surges. It's a hormone that your pituitary gland makes and says ovulate to your ovaries. And your ovaries may or may not ovulate with that information, but they are being told to. So that LH surge tells us it should predict when we're going to ovulate. But these new tech, the new trackers, the strip is going to test the LH. It's also going to test the estrogen metabolites. It's also going to test the progesterone metabolites. So it's going to tell us, like, is estrogen rising appropriately at the right time? And then we can say, does that track with cervical fluid? Like, can we line up our symptoms? That's always really interesting. Does the LH surge happen? And then does the progesterone rise? Have we really ovulated? So if you're not tracking, definitely start tracking something, even if it's just writing the first day of every period into your iPhone, whatever. But if you are interested in learning more about menstrual cycle presentation and how normal your cycles are, I think Mira is a great brand, Mira, and Nito is another one. It's a lot less expensive, INITO. And those are just really helpful for all of this.
Thanks. We'll include links for those in our show notes to help people out. So Grace, you mentioned autoimmune diseases are often an issue for infertility. Can you kind of give our audience more specifics on what autoimmune diseases or like immune system imbalances, exactly how they impact fertility and the ability to maintain a healthy pregnancy?
So autoimmune conditions there are a few ways to answer this. We're going to take Hashimoto's as a good example. It's certainly the autoimmune disease I see the most frequently, but it helps kind of set the stage here. So with autoimmunity, if there are antibodies attacking a gland or a receptor site, we have to remember that, especially for Hashimoto's, there aren't just thyroid receptors they're in the reproductive tract. We have thyroid receptors in the uterus and the endometrium, in the fallopian tubes, even in the ovaries, right on the eggs. We need thyroid stimulation to mature an egg for appropriate reproduction and ovulation. That's a required hormone. And if there are antibodies out there that are attacking thyroid receptor sites, well, now we've got antibody activity right there on the egg, right there in the oocyte, causing this kind of inflammatory cascade right where we need things to be calm and settled and full of antioxidants rather than oxidative stress. So there's this direct attack on the reproductive system that comes with a lot of autoimmune diseases like Hashimoto's. There's also the downstream effects of like an upregulated inflammatory event and also an upregulated immune system. Implantation requires a little bit of inflammation. It is an immune event, right? If this other is trying to embed, make a home in our body. If there were any other scenario where we're trying to make a home in our bodies, we call that like a parasite or an infection, and our immune systems would be expected to get it out. But for pregnancy, we very much don't want that to happen. And we need a really well-coordinated immune system to make sure that is protected and that other gets to stay and embed and connect to our blood supply. So if our immune systems are upregulated, as in autoimmunity, they usually overreact to this other, and we see a lot of miscarriages in autoimmunity, and we see a lot of implantation failure and, the IVF setting, because there's just too much of this immune activity right there where it matters.
That makes a lot of sense.
But even like something that feels like further away from that. I had a patient with pernicious anemia. So this is a autoimmune disease where the immune system attacks cells in the digestive tract that help break down B12 and absorb it. So we usually catch this by seeing low serum B12s, elevated homocysteine. Like there's some labs we run that we can catch it. And as you guys all know, autoimmune diseases often run in packs, right? You don't often just get the one, you usually get a few more, and they like develop over time. So pernicious anemia is always what I'm looking out for if we already know there's Hashimotos or we already know there's autoimmunity there. And I had a patient just recently who is now pregnant. And what she really worked on last summer was correcting and treating the autoimmunity, the pernicious anemia. And she did a ton of betaine HCl. She did just a ton of upper gut work, started doing B12 shots, really taking care of methyl groups with lots of choline supplementation and methylated Bs. And I think that was just such an important piece, right? Because I'm not sure if autoimmune inflammation was more the cause, or the fact that she really just didn't have the nutrients available to procreate. Methyl groups, for example, are required for DNA replication, which is all that early pregnancy is. It's just this little zygote growing, all making all this DNA. And I think that because of her pernicious anemia, she just didn't have the resources to procreate. Like she didn't have the resources to contribute to that. So that was like an interesting case of not an out there autoimmune condition, but one that's not like that walks into the office every day.
Yeah, I think it's great that you are looking further into that, because I don't know a lot of doctors, if you walked into your regular OB's office, that they'd be like, well, let's check this. Let's see how you're methylating. Let's see what what vitamins you might be deficient in. Like, they're like, oh no, just go to fertility doctor and start jump
Or
right
keep
into
trying.
IVF or keep trying. And years go by sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But by digging a little deeper, not only can you potentially, hopefully solve some infertility issues, but you're also going to feel better.
Yeah.
Your body's going to feel better. You're going to feel better and be more capable of carrying a pregnancy. So, okay, you developed what you call the root cause fertility formula. Love that title. Can you walk us through what the key elements of that approach is and how it differs from a standard fertility pathway?
Sure. And I've been refining this as I go, but currently, like as it stands, step one is always diagnosis. And that's good medicine, right? Diagnose, then treat. Let's not leap to treatment, IVF, if we don't know why. I'm not saying IVF is a bad option. It's an option a lot of my patients take. It's incredible medicine. Like, what? You're making life? This is nuts. However, let's diagnose first. Diagnose, then treat. So first step is a full workup. And I'm working with a lot of women who they'll tell me I'm on the clock, right? They're worried that their fertility is declining, because there is unfortunately a hard stop for females. There'll be a day where there are no longer viable eggs available. So we want to make sure that we're building our families before that timeline ends. So for women who are really like 38 and higher is when we want to say, like, let's not just kick this can down the road. Let's not, take a meandering path. Let's do all the diagnosis we can do. We don't want in 6 months to say, oh, should we have tested that? Or maybe we should go back and start at the beginning again. We want to just get it all done. So step one is really that diagnostic deliverable of like, well, why? Why haven't you gotten pregnant yet? Why haven't you stayed pregnant? And then step two, there's a saying in naturopathic medicine where one of our jobs is to remove the obstacles to cure. So once we have the diagnosis and we know that there's an infection in the gut, we know that there's inflammation, we know that there's poor blood glucose control. Well, that's my job now, is to teach the patient how we can remove those obstacles so we can cure the body. And that's all the foundational work. And it sounds like that's a lot of the things you guys talk about, right? It's environmental toxicity and detox. It's gut health. It's rest and feeling at ease and sleeping appropriately. It's moving your body appropriately. And a lot of those things just aren't online. They haven't been diagnosed properly, or they just haven't been like looped back to a fertility perspective of like, oh, I need to, this is important for fertility. I just didn't put those pieces together. So step 2 is we really lay that foundational work. And then once we have that, now we're in a position to like go above and beyond. And then we're starting to really improve egg quality, gamete quality, right? Egg and sperm quality is what we're focusing on, just drenching the body in antioxidants and high quality nutrition and making sure everything is not just good enough, but optimal. And then we go into a phase where we're tracking and we're timing intercourse. Like then we go into the trying to conceive phase of what else can we learn from your cycles? How are you ovulating? What does that mean for timing? And I think that's where it's not really a 5th step, but the 5th piece of this is staying engaged in that process, because it's really easy to, once you've done all this work and now you've tried for a couple cycles and you haven't gotten pregnant yet, to like throw in the towel. But like, this is the time you really have to like dig in and engage. Like, you haven't gotten pregnant for 6 years. We have in the last 4 months improved your health to the nth degree. Let's just give it a little more time. Let's give the body some time with that before we say, oh, this isn't working.
That's so hopeful. I love that approach.
Great. It seems to be working well. I mean, as I say, I'm always open to refining it and learning more. I just went to this lecture on Monday by this fabulous reproductive immunologist. And, he kept pushing us to like, he's like, you can't get complacent. The fertility can't be cookie cutter. And unfortunately, a lot of fertility clinics have just kind of cookie cutter programs and, game plans, protocols. And there's nothing wrong with a good protocol, but you have to individualize it, because everybody is different. Every body, and you're not in fertility, you're not working with one body, you're working with 2 bodies. So you can't do that cookie cutter medicine. And you always have to be refining your craft. So we're trying.
I love that. You've also talked about hidden fertility disruptors in everyday environments.
Mm-hmm.
And what are some of the surprising environmental or lifestyle factors that interfere with fertility?
Ooh, things that would surprise us. Well, gosh, I mean, I feel like this Dr. Swan did such a good job of cracking this open in her new documentary. But the idea is that there are these chemicals that have been made in the last 50, 60 years, have been invented, and they've changed our lives. Plastics have made things so much easier, right? There's no denying that. And they're everywhere. They're in our clothing, they're in our self-care products, they're in our kitchens, they're everywhere. And now we're realizing that, oh my gosh, these are actually endocrine disruptive chemicals, which means they communicate directly with our hormone systems and upregulate the amount of hormones we're making, downregulate the amount of hormones we're making, confuse the receptor sites. They're integrated into our endocrine system. And that's very confusing for the body and dangerous. So, the premise of like, well, if we can get rid of endocrine disrupting chemicals, our endocrine systems will work better. That's not a leap, right? That makes sense. So I think the surprising places of where these hide are in all the fragrances. To me, it's when you I don't know, maybe you guys have experienced this. I find that my autoimmune patients and my perimenopausal patients are much more reactive to scents, right? Like when somebody walks by and they're like, oh my gosh. And the husband will be like, I don't smell anything. But the body sprays, the detergents, the laundry detergents, and now you see the commercials where it's like, oh, put this in your washing machine and it'll smell like this for a month. And you're like, no, don't do that.
That's not healthy.
Don't do
No,
that.
That's not healthy.
They're like, let's saturate our clothes with fragrance and let's
saturate
plug
our
it into our
teens.
walls.
There was a commercial where like the mom's just like spraying the kids with Febreze, and it's like, no, don't do that to our teenagers. Don't do it. I mean, it's like funny, right? I get it. Teens smell, but we can do better. So I think finding those in our house, because we just have become accustomed to it, the plugins, the highly scented detergents and soaps, and you don't have to go out and spend $1,000 on natural products tomorrow. But like as each bottle runs out, can we make a $10 upgrade that only is using essential oils as fragrance, or is, I don't know, fragrance free? Because that actually has impact.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes it's not even a $10 upgrade. Sometimes it's the same price. You just get the fragrance free version.
Right, you just get fragrance free.
You know,
no big
and
deal.
it's
Dermatologist approved.
exactly.
It says it right there.
Yeah. Well, we were wondering if you would be willing to, and of course, we want to keep this HIPAA compliant, but if you could possibly share a story without identifying details about someone who'd been told their infertility was unexplained, but later discovered a root cause that changed their outcome.
Yes, I found a good case for you guys. All right, let's go through it. So the patient came to me. She was 38 years old when she started working with me, and she had been trying to they had been trying to conceive for 3 years, and in that 3 years had 2 early losses. And at some point, fairly early in their workup, so probably at the year mark, because that's when most people get worked up. Guess when their insurance covers it, is if they've been trying for a year, then insurance says, okay, now you can run the tests. We'll pay for them. And even then they don't pay for most of them. Anyways, that's a different soapbox. So this couple came to me, and she at some point had been told she had low thyroid, hypothyroid, and was put on thyroid medication and got that TSH down to a 2.5. Great. But then they were referred to reproductive endocrinologists. They were referred to fertility clinic. It wasn't on the menu doing IVF for them. So they were looking for other answers. They found me, and right away it was like, oh, okay, what about this thyroid? Do we know anything more about your thyroid condition? Is it Hashimoto's? Did they test antibodies? No, I don't think so. No. So we ran those tests, and we found that she did in fact have Hashimoto's. Her TPO was in the at the beginning, it was in the upper 200s, which isn't like, I mean, I've seen it above 600s, right? That's kind of like middle range, but they were there. There were some antibodies there, and the TG antibodies, the thyroglobulin antibodies, were also elevated. And for every couple that has any history of loss, I do require the male. I do my best to get it, that the male do what's called a DNA fragmentation test. So that test where we're looking at DNA, because it turns out early loss is very often a male factor pattern. We think about once the pregnancy's in mama, that if there's a miscarriage, that's on her and her uterine environment, and it can be, but it turns out that the quality of the DNA and the quality of that sperm makes a big difference if that pregnancy can hold. So I always ask for a DNA fragmentation if the male's over 40 or if there's a history of loss. And in their case, that both were true. So we found out that he had a really high DNA fragmentation, which is, we want it to be low. So we're looking for him, we're looking at oxidative stress. And we saw that on his blood work, that he had inflammation, he had poor glucose control. He was doing the nicotine pouches. That's, inflammatory. So anyways, so he had that poor DNA fragmentation. So we were treating him for that. And that got discovered fairly early on. It was one of those great couples that he was happy to get more workup. And for her Hashimoto's, there wasn't too much else. The homocysteine was a little bit high. Her insulin was a little bit high. It was like an 8 fasting glucose for fertility, or fasting insulin for fertility. I want that at like a 4 or 5 range. So it was a little bit elevated. And for a little while there, we couldn't figure out why. So we ended up putting a continuous glucose monitor on her. And those are really easy to get these days. For $49, you can get a 2-week Lingo. You just pop it on, download the app, and it's reading your blood sugar for 2 weeks straight. It's such interesting information. It tells you, well, what, like, yes, I would assume if I drank a Coca-Cola, my blood sugar would spike. But for some of us, we could have strawberries and our glucose would spike. unless we paired those strawberries with Greek yogurt or some protein or some fat or like something to stabilize that blood sugar. So we learned a lot about her blood sugar there, and we did a lot of work on getting her diet to be really blood sugar stable, which was great because we got to do that for both of them. He was a soda drinker, and he, like most men, he was like, oh, that looks neat, I want to do that. So then he slapped on a CGM and learned about like, oh wow, this is what Coca-Cola is doing to my blood sugar. So that was a great way to get the data in front, and that works really well for most of my patients are type A women. Type A, really, they want to see the data, they want to know why they have to make these changes. I find that men are often the same way. So get the data in front of them, great, their blood sugar is improving. My Hashimoto's, I don't want to say protocol, but like the steps, the boxes I always want to check are we eliminating well, right? Like how's digestive function? We ran a GI map on her. So that's a stool test that sees, well, is there anything in the gut that doesn't belong? Bacterial overgrowths, yeast, parasites, worms, that kind of thing. Or is everything that should be in the digestive tract, the diversity score of like tons of different bacteria, are they there? So her GI map wasn't great. And we also ran what's called a vaginal microbiome test. And this is one you can order at home. The company is called Evvy, EVVY. And they send you a swab, you do a vaginal swab, and you send it back. The vagina, unlike the colon, shouldn't be very diverse. There should just be really one bacteria growing there. And if we see lots of different bacteria or fertility disruptors, we of course have to target that. So we were very curious about her various biomes. So we put her through a gut protocol because we did find some bacterial overgrowths, which were associated with autoimmunity. That's like a classic root cause of autoimmunity is gut dysbiosis. So we walked her through that step. For every patient, I create what's called a roadmap. I say, well, this is the root cause of your infertility, and here's what I would do to treat it. First, I'd start with a little bit of a detox. Then we go into gut health. Now we're going to work on stress. In her case, that was a really big one. On my intake form, I asked, what percentage of the time do you feel at ease? And she wrote like 10% or something, like just really like sad, really, like something like, oh, you don't feel that just like often, that sense of ease. So we had to really work hard to plug her back into that feeling, because that kind of stress disruption is going to have huge impact on sex hormones, of course, but also at the aggravation of an autoimmune disease. Turns out she was deficient in iron. So that's another one that most docs will check a CBC and they'll say, well, if your red blood cells aren't shrinking, then you have enough iron. But like if your red blood cells are shrinking, right? Anemia, that's what that word means, then you've got a very severe, like we're down this road. But can we look a little bit like less down the road and say, well, is there iron deficiency here? Because iron does other things other than just make the red blood cells plump. So she turns out she had very low ferritin. She was walking around with a ferritin of like in the low teens, and we wanted up above 70. So we got her and it's hard to get enough iron from diet. It's certainly hard when you have a gastrointestinal bug. So we kind of did this all in stages. We gave her some selenium, some vitamin D. We know from the research those things help bring down antibodies. I have a couple herbal tricks up my sleeve for that too. And after I put her on a 6-month treatment plan. I said, give me 6 months. And if you're committed and if you can actually like do these steps and really get into this, I think we can get us there. So we did. We saw the antibodies start to decline. Now we're in like the 90s or so. So we got him, I think we cut him down about half, which was great. And his DNA fragmentation went down. And it was one of those cases where she came in thinking like, I have a thyroid issue, but it's corrected, right? Because like the TSH was now under 2.5, which is where we want it for fertility. But there was more to the story, and there was just more testing to be done. And then 4 cycles later, they did get and stay pregnant, which was fabulous.
And it's like, how rarely is it ever just like one thing you need to change? It's always a perfect storm that creates the situation, and you have to address all the little pieces. It's never just like, well, just start taking this vitamin and you'll be good. Like, it's never that simple.
It's rare. It's rare. Every once in a while, a little thyroid medication does it for a fertility couple. And like, that's awesome. That's great. It was just like a frank hypothyroid and now it's better. But, certainly in today's world, there's too much input. There's too much coming in. And I'm talking not only about environmental toxicities, but also like just the stress and our culture of go, go, go and not being at ease is having huge impact on our ability to get pregnant.
So one thing we always like to do for our listeners is to connect them with people like yourself that could make a difference in their lives if they are struggling with infertility. So for those that are listening and thinking, I need more of this, how can they connect with you? How can they learn more about the work that you're doing?
Oh, yeah, I would love to work with you. I think if you want to work with me directly, that's very, very straightforward. It's drgracecharles.com. And if you write in drgracecharles.com/today, it'll ask for your email and then it'll give you a list of 10 things you can do to start improving your fertility today. It's just like a nice like action item list. Like, okay, I can do this today. So download that for sure. But I think if you're looking for someone who you can walk into their office and shake their hand, or looking for someone a little more local to you, we want you to find a functional fertility specialist. That's a Google search term, or root cause fertility specialist. That's one that's gaining a little bit of traction of people knowing to type in those words and that connecting them to the right people. And I also think, I want to connect with you. Absolutely. But I also think that there's nothing wrong with leaning a little bit on AI to learn more about your case as you prepare to meet with someone to help you go through it. I mean, if you do get a temp drop to test BBT, or if you do get like an Anito device and start monitoring your cycles in that way, plug that information into ChatGPT and like break that down. And I'm not suggesting you just like blindly take whatever medical advice that it gives to you, but certainly with like the correct dialogue and a little back and forth, you can learn so much about your own cycles and what it means and how, as you guys were saying, like tracking is such a great first step, and how your symptoms are lining up and finally discovering the why your life feels like up and down and up and down, as opposed to just steady Eddie. But yes, connect with me on my website, drgracecharles.com, drop me a line, or book an appointment. I do free consults for anyone who wants to learn more.
Awesome. Are you on social media?
Yes, I have an Instagram account. It's Steamboat Fertility. Nope, it's Dr. Grace Charles. Sorry. X that. It's
right.
It's the same. Dr. Grace Charles on Instagram.
Okay, we'll be sure to put that information in our show notes as well so people can connect with you.
We really appreciate you coming to talk to us and to our audience about something as personal and often emotional as fertility can be. Most of our audience is open for whatever, and so we'll go and do, but fertility is actually one that we've had multiple times people ask us to talk more about. So we really appreciate that you're here today to talk with us about that.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah. And like Alicia said, we will include all that information on how to contact you in our show notes. As always, to our audience, thank you for joining us here at Autoimmune Adventures. And please remember that you are worthy of joy. Disease does not define your life. You do.